All right, welcome back to Musicians Edition. Last time we worked on the snare drum part to 175 in Essential Elements, and today we're going to look at the tambourine part of number 175 in the snare drum part of our Essential Elements book. Okay? So, like we've talked about a few times before, but just to recap, when we hold the tambourine, we want to find this little cutout here where there's a gap in our jingles, right? Usually where there's a hole right there, right? And that's where we want to grab on to our tambourine, right? Remember, we don't want to put our finger or our thumb or anything in that hole. That's for mounting the tambourine on a cymbal stand if we need to play it with one hand. But today, since we can use both hands for this, we're just going to grab onto the tambourine right there, right? Thumb lays down on top. Back fingers either wrap around the shell or can touch the head if we want a little bit more muffling, or if we don't, we can put them right there, right? That's a kind of a preference thing for the type of sound that you want to get out of your tambourine, okay? Usually I put at least a couple fingers, maybe just one, on the head of the tambourine just for a little bit extra dampening. Or if we're playing really loud, we can take all of the fingers off. We want a more open, like a little more sound from the head of the tambourine. Totally up to you. You can kind of mess around with that and decide what sound you want to get and how much muffling you want to apply to the head. Okay? Now the main thing that we need to work out in this piece on the tambourine part, the thing that's a little bit tricky is the rolls, right? And you see the notes with slashes through the stem, those are where we're going to play our rolls, right? Much in the same way that we would see rolls written for snare drum. Although sometimes in this book we see them with a Z through the stem. We'll also see them with 3 slashes through the stem. That's what we see in the tambourine part here, right? And now you can see in the piece it's notated that we're going to play these as shake rolls, right? So there's a couple different ways that we can play rolls on tambourine, but kind of the main way is a shake roll. That's what we're going to do here, and then later on I'll show you a different way that you can get that roll sound on a tambourine that you can start messing around with if you would like to. Okay, so to get our shake roll, just our basic shake roll, we're just going to take our tambourine in our hand like this, and we're just going to twist our hand back and forth, right? Kind of similar to the motion of turning a doorknob, okay? So just like that. Sometimes it's helpful to try to work this without the tambourine in your hand, just to get that feeling in your hand, right? Usually when we're playing percussion instruments, we're moving from the wrist, right? If we're playing snare drum or a mallet instrument or whatever, we're kind of getting this motion, right? Moving from the wrist like that, as opposed to twisting from side to side. So it's a little bit different motion than what we're used to in a lot of percussion instruments. So sometimes it can take a little bit to just get used to that rotation feeling as opposed to flexing from the wrist, okay? So once you're really comfortable with that, we can put the tambourine in our hand and work on shaking it from side to side. Okay? And I like to practice this kind of exaggerating the motion, right? Eventually when we roll, it's going to be a smaller amount of motion in our hand, but I like to exaggerate it at first just to get that feeling. So you can start that way just to really get that tambourine moving. Okay, and then over time, as we're getting that big wide motion, then we're going to start making it a little bit smaller and a little bit faster, right? So we'll start slow and wide, and then we'll start going faster and smaller as we speed up, okay? So it's going to look like this. Okay? And you can go through that drill of kind of going from really wide and slow to a little more narrow and fast until you get to kind of a nice sustained sound that sounds good to your ears, right? And remember, anytime we're rolling on a percussion instrument, what we're trying to do is mimic the sustain that other instruments get from being able to just hold one note for a long time, right? And so we want to shake the tambourine fast enough that it sounds like one unbroken sound and not a bunch of little sounds kind of chopped up together, right? The same way that when we roll on a snare drum, we want a nice, even, smooth sound, or when we roll on a suspended cymbal or something like that, right? So take your time kind of developing that roll motion into something that sounds really even, right? So we can go through this drill again, and then you can, this is a nice little thing to kind of warm up on anytime you have shake rolls in a piece or whatever. So start nice and wide, and then we'll work our way faster and smaller. Okay, and then a nice little way to practice this as well is to go to that narrow and faster motion and then work your way back to the bigger, slower motion, right? So go from this all the way down to this, and then slowly work your way back to this. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, and so that's just to kind of help you develop control of how fast or slow or how big or wide your motion is with the tambourine, so that when you start to roll, you can use your ears and then adjust the speed and the width of your motion in order to get the sound that you're looking for. Okay, now when we see rolls in time, we don't really pulse them out like we would on a snare drum, right? We're not thinking a specific rhythm. Like on snare drum, when we're thinking buzz, but we're buzzing in 16th notes. We don't really do that so much with tambourine. We're just moving our hands during that specific period of time. Again, very similar to what we would do on a suspended cymbal, right? We're not playing a specific rhythm. We're just moving our hands back and forth for the duration that we have marked in the music, right? So in this piece, all of our rolls you see, if you glance through it, all of our rolls are on quarter notes. So we just need to work on rolling for one beat at a time. And so we're just gonna shake the tambourine for one beat, keeping really solid time, and then release on beat 2, okay? So we're thinking 1, 2, right? And we're gonna articulate the release note, right? So when you look at measure 1, you see there's a tie coming out of beat 1 that ends on beat 2. So beat 2 is the one that we're actually gonna articulate with our right hand, right? So we're gonna shake and then articulate beat 2. Ready? So we're thinking 1, 2, right? Ready, go. Right? And something I like to do on tambourine, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, is I'm gonna start my roll with an articulation as well. So I'm gonna play like this on beat 1, and then start shaking right after that, and then do this again on beat 2, right? So that looks like this, right? 1, 2. So let's try that together. And ready, go. Okay? One more time. Ready, go. All right? So we see we have measure 1, measure 2, measure 3 are all the same. Something a little bit different on measure 4. Same thing in the second line. Same thing in the third line. And then in the fourth line, we have that same measure again for 3 measures, and then we have 1, 2, and roll 4. So just slightly different there in the last line of the piece, okay? So let's go ahead and play that the last line of the piece first. Since it has one more extra roll than the rest of the lines do, let's go ahead and start there, and we'll get a few extra rolls in, okay? So here we go. Bottom line of the piece, those 4 measures. 1, 2, ready, go. All right. So then once you're comfortable with that, we can just go ahead and put it in the context of the rest of the piece. If you can play that last line, the rest of the lines are the same with one less roll in them, right? So then we'll just be careful that we know which line we're on, so we know if we roll in the last measure or if we just play the rhythm straight ahead in the last measure. Okay? So let's go ahead and put this whole piece together with all the rolls. And then I'll show you, like I promised earlier, I'll show you one other way that you can roll on this tambourine here. Okay, here we go all the way through. 1, 2, ready, go. All right, so that's 175 the way that it's written. That will get you through the tambourine part, working on developing your shake roll and getting that nice, sounding nice and even. The one other way that you can roll on a tambourine that would work for this piece is what we call a finger roll, right? So we're just gonna take one of our fingers. Some people like to do it with their thumb. I prefer my middle finger. I don't really know why, other than it just feels a little bit more comfortable. I'm able to get the kind of grip that I need. Right, and what we're gonna do is just push our finger along the edge of the tambourine and get enough friction between our finger and the head that we get some vibration, right? Now, you might notice if you try to do that on your tambourine right now, we don't really get a lot of friction, right? So what we gotta do is take something like this beeswax that I have here that came with my tambourine, right? And we just gotta put something on the head of the tambourine to give us that friction, right? So this is just a little stick of beeswax that we can just put right on there to make the head a little bit more sticky. Some people also use like rosin or something like that. I prefer beeswax because it's a little bit stickier and kind of gives me the friction that I like. Different people like to use different stuff for that, but beeswax is a really good option. So then I'm just going to take my finger, put it right here on the head, and then slide it across. Now that I got that beeswax on there, it's going to give me enough friction that it gets the instrument vibrating and shakes the jingles. Okay, so that's going to give you a little different roll. It's a little bit of a tighter sound. Right, the jingles aren't moving as much back and forth, but they are moving nice and quick when I do this sort of thing. Right, so that or the shake roll, both good options for this sort of piece. So the way this would look when you start the roll, since we're not doing this before we shake, I like to kind of push this finger down a little bit to give me that articulation at the beginning of the roll. Okay, and then you notice also when I do this, I don't really get the articulation on beat 2 either. I just kind of have to stop my roll, right? And that works just fine. Just to kind of push your finger and then stop on the release note. Right, but another little trick that's helpful that you can start messing around with as well. Takes a little while to get used to. But what I'm going to do is when I get to beat 2, I'm going to drop the heel of my hand down onto the tambourine. Right, so I'm going to push my finger and then drop my wrist down for beat 2, and then play the other notes with my fingers. Okay. So that's just another option of a way you could play a piece like this that gives you a little bit of a different roll sound. I typically use this roll if I have like shorter rolls or quieter rolls. A lot of times this technique works a little bit better. Again, this piece specifically notates it uses a shake roll, right? So use a shake roll for it, but it's just a little trick that you can start to work on because it takes a while to develop. All right, so there's a couple different ways to play the tambourine part of number 175. Make sure you spend some time working on your shake roll. spend some time working on your finger roll, just like the other percussion instruments that we work on. It takes a while to get used to these motions. It takes a while to kind of get your ears dialed in to where you're able to control the instrument and get the sound that you want out of it using these different techniques. So spend some time just messing around with those things and kind of getting them dialed in, and then apply it to the piece. All right, so happy practicing, and I will see you next time.